Namaskar, good morning. Thank you, Dr. Huda, for wonderful introduction. It's a privilege to be here with the CLFMA annual convention. I think earlier also twice or thrice I had come here. And it's always good to, when you come here, you learn when you talk to the various people who are stalwarts in the feed industry. It's very important. And this is the first session with you're starting with the dairy, then poultry, then fish or aqua. I've got last 42 years experience of in dairy only. And yeah, last 1 or 2 years, little bit learning about poultry or aqua with after associating with IB group. Well, before I give, okay, it has been loaded. Dairy, poultry or aqua, what is this? These sectors represent the basic food of human consumption. And in India, the food sector is one of the biggest sector, not one of the, it is the biggest sector, around 60 lakh crore per annum. But it's a very complex sector also. It's not very simple business that you buy raw material, process it, or make something, a machinery and sell it. There are 4 important stakeholders involved, and anything you are doing, anything you are planning, whether it's a policy or pricing or anything, you have to see that you meet the expectation of these 4 stakeholders. No doubt, when you are in livestock sector, the biggest stakeholder is the farmer. And why farmer is in livestock sector? Basically, for very, very stable and remunerative prices for the produce. So one has to meet their expectation. The other most important stakeholder is the consumer. And in India, we have about 1.45 billion people. And what they are looking for, a very healthy, tasty, affordable nutrition. Third important stakeholder is the government, the policy makers. And for them, why basic food sector is important? Because it is the most important sector for the food security as well as for employment. So any policy they make, they always look into these areas. And lastly is the people mostly sitting here, the entrepreneur, the companies, the cooperative, what you are looking for, a very sustainable, dependable top line, bottom line. So whenever you are doing anything, you have to see you meet the expectations of these. We say for the 1 liter of milk produced, 70% goes for the feeding, green, dry, or concentrated feed. And that is why this sector, anybody who is a dairy has to look into very closely. So now in my presentation for next 20 minutes or little less, I'll be talking about basically how the dairy world over, how India got the leadership, number 1, what are the reasons for the success in dairy for India, and now what are the opportunity and challenges, and lastly, what are the action area for the cattle feed industry for the growing demand in the dairy. I mean, these are the 2 main actors for our dairy sector, cow or buffalo. Coming to the world milk production, we all know India is world's largest producer, and around 24 to 25% of world milk production is from India. World is growing at less than 2%, whereas India is growing at more than 4.5 to 5% per annum. This is the status of self-sufficiency for milk. You can see besides Europe, USA, and New Zealand, Australia, in the Asia, India is the only country which is self-sufficient. And we are surrounded by most of the countries which are deficit, whether you take Russia, China, Southeast country, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. All these countries are milk deficit countries for last many, many decades, like India was there 40, 50 years back. So that is the opportunity we have got. And importance of dairy sector in India is because dairy is contributing to 1/4 of the total agriculture GDP. So whatever is the GDP of India, which I can say around 50, 60 lakh, 25% is contributed by the dairy. So that is the importance for any agriculture family. And this slide shows the reason for the success of Indian dairy sector. India is the only country which is passing the maximum value of consumer rupee to the farmers, around 71%. This is the average. Few cooperatives may be passing on up to 80%. And so 65 to 85% goes to the farmer who is producing milk. Vis-a-vis 1/3 you can see in other parts of India, the world. But Indian dairy farming is different than the other dairy-rich country. We have got very, very small farms. Average, each farmer will be having 2 or 3 cows of buffalo. And you see the countries which are rich or surplus in dairy having 50, 60, 70,000, 6,000. In case of USA, it goes up to 30,000 cows. So in our country, is a small farms, basically family, like a family members. And this is just data show the total world milk produced, how much each animal contribute. So around 81% is by the cow and 15% is our deer buffalo. And that is the world milk production. In India, it will be around 47%. So how we build the leadership in the dairy? This is very, very important graph. I think you please understand that light blue color is the India's growth and India's milk production. Around 50 years back, India's milk production was 1/3 of USA and 1/8 of whole of Europe. And mid-70s, when Operation Flood started, White Revolution, Dr. Verghese Kurian, the father of White Revolution, when he started the Operation Flood, which was nothing but replicating Amul model all over India. And you see how our milk production grew. From a milk deficit countries, for a country which was dependent on imports, we became, by mid-90s, world largest producer of milk. And today, we are producing 2.5 times of USA and around 30% more than the Europe. And that too with 30 to 40% more of milk solids, because around half of milk is buffalo, which has got double fat and around 20% more protein. So this is the achievement. This is the graph, actually, frankly speaking. I mean, last 30 years, I've seen whenever a lot of this big delegation comes to negotiate the FTAs, free trade agreements. So they say India is a big country, even small imports will not impact from our country, whether New Zealand or Australia or Europe. And we show them this, especially our policy makers who are negotiating on our behalf with them. Look here, a sector is growing at this rate, which is envy of whole world. Why you want to tinker it? What is the reason? What is the need to change any policy? When your existing policies are paying you rich dividends, why you want to change it? Later I will talk that. So you can see how our milk production over last more than 75 years grew. Till mid-70s, you can say we were hovering around 21, 23, around 6% of global milk production. And today, last year was 239 or 240 million metric ton, or 25% of global. So whatever milk is produced in India, basically, around 40% is retained by the farmer at home for self-consumption or selling within the village. Around 65 crore liters of milk is produced in India per day. And the remaining 60%, what comes to as a market surplus, around 30% goes to the organized sector. Or you can say around 15 crore liter, 53 million metric ton throughout the year. Around 15 crore liter is coming to the organized sector, private and cooperative. And you can see more or less half of it is being procured and processed by the private and cooperatives. And it is not only our milk production increased, per capita availability, which used to be around 110 gram, has now multiplied 4 times. You can see after independence, our per capita availability was declining because of increase in the population and stagnating milk production. But after the Operation Flood or White Revolution, you can see how our per capita has improved. And you see, milk is a very basic and important source of nutrition. So nutritional security, milk has provided. I'll show you later on how poultry and aqua are also, there are few things. And this basically graph shows that data about our milk production, that every 25 years for the last 50 years, our milk production multiplies by 3x, 3 times. You can see around 24 million metric tons in 72, then 97 it grew to 71, and then after that 25 years to 2023 to 231. So every 25 years 3x, and per capita availability every 25 years multiplies to 2x, from 110 to today 466. And based on that data, if you further extrapolate and taking average of 4.5% growth rate, by 2048 or Viksit Bharat time, India will be producing around 628 million metric ton. And we'll be contributing 45% of world milk production, India only. Why I'm showing you this data, you can start multiplying what will be the market size for your product, feed. I'll talk later. And per capita availability will increase to around 850. It will not multiply further because up to some level, we'll come equal to the other parts of the developed parts of the world like Europe, USA, and also equal to the some parts of India. Also India, if you go to North, Punjab, Haryana, already per capita consumption is this much. But what I wanted to show you in this slide is the way our milk production is growing and the way our consumption is growing. By 2047, against our milk production of 628, our consumption, after considering the per capita consumption of 850 gram, we shall be having around 100 million metric ton or 110 million metric ton surplus milk. And let me tell you, today, world trade is only of around 100 million metric ton, which will be around 150 million metric ton by 2047. So you can see that if we have to continue the same growth path, 2/3 of the world trade has to be from India, and how to do it, that we have to talk. That is the biggest challenge for us. Today, we got 300 million milk animals, 100 million buffalo, 200 million cows. Out of that, around any given time, around 40% are in milking stage. And total milk produced, 47% is buffalo and 53% is there. This is the per animal yield, which is much lower than the world milk production, because the reason is simple. Our milk production model is low input, low output. We mainly feed to the animals whatever is left over after human consumption. Very sustainable environmentally. And that is why productivity is low. But definitely the way we want to grow, here comes that how we can increase the input so that we can improve the output. And like I mentioned, milk is a very important source of 80 million families. So 80 million multiplied by 5 members, you can say around 40 crore people. This is a very important graph where you can understand the importance of livestock sector in the last 50 years. You can see the first column is the growth rate, where milk is 4.7% growth rate last 50 years. The other sector, poultry, is 50% more, 6.42. And in the last 50 years, you can see the dairy industry has multiplied by 10 times milk production. And the other industry, livestock sector, which you represent, is the poultry, has multiplied around 22 times. And you compare with the other, whether the cereals or crops is only 3.3 times. So we know how these two sectors have grown and given a very dependable income to the farmers. And next, this shows that in the last 50 years, how composition of total agriculture GDP has changed. You can see the milk, which used to be 10% of the total agriculture GDP, is now 24%. The meat, eggs, which I think you represent, and other livestock production have multiplied 2, 3, 4 times. This is the production, but how consumption has changed. Some of you may have seen the monthly per capita expense data released by the Government of India. This shows that an urban Indian is spending around 7,000 per month in India. And out of that, in urban India, around 40% is on food. If 7,000 is the monthly expense, so around 2,800 is spent only on food. In case of rural India, total expense is 4,100 and 47% is on food. So you can say an average Indian spending around 90 rupees per day on his thali in urban India. 90 rupees prati din aap khana khate ho ek person. And we have to see how much is part or portion of that of the sector where we are working, whether it's the poultry or the dairy, etc. This shows, out of the total 7,000 in urban India, around dairy is around 7.2%, egg, fish, meat is around 3.5%. So you can see, later on I'll show you, this is the out of the total food, how the thali has changed over last 50 years. 50 years back, milk used to be only 14% of the thali, not 50 years, around 20 years back, or 25 years back. 14%, now today is 18%. But you see eggs, fish and meat, which used to be only 5.6 in rural and 6.5 in urban of total. In case of rural, it has doubled, and in case of urban India, it has 50% increase expenditure. So, if 90 rupees is the per day expense, per month expense, so average Indian is spending around 17 rupees on milk and milk products per day in his thali, and another 9 rupees on egg, fish and poultry. Dairy, milk is more than the dal roti and sugar. You can see average urban is spending 466 rupees per capita per month, whereas it is 364 on the pulse, bread and sugar. But consumption of dairy or meat or egg is not same across India. If you cut India like this, the north and the west, these are mainly more dairy consuming country. Expenditure on dairy is much more than the meat, fish or poultry. You can see that each state-wise, what like in Haryana, urban, 1,040 rupees is on dairy and only 85 rupees on meat, egg. Or you take Rajasthan or other thing. But if you see the meat or egg dominating state, those are east and the south. You can say like in any Tamil Nadu you see, West Bengal, Telangana you see, Telangana 394 milk and 344 meat or eggs, more or less same. So what are the reasons for this success of Indian dairy industry? How much time I've got? Anji, मैं just कितना time दे रहे हैं आप? अच्छा, okay. Now, firstly, I think among the main reason is the 50 years back, policymakers, farmers decided that we have to self-sufficient. So where we decided that we'll protect and encourage Indian milk production, so that was where operation was rolled out. The second most important reason is farmers don't supply chain. Reason for the success of Indian dairy sector, why farmers are getting 71%, that India's supply chain is the most efficient supply chain. Why I'm telling you this, that tomorrow if you are developing poultry supply chain, because it is still unorganized, one has to see how to match the Indian dairy supply chain, where what consumer pays, 70% goes to the farmer. And that is the reason why any multinational or any foreign dairy companies, whoever tried to come in India, they could not succeed because reason is India's supply chain is very efficient. And then the other reason which are mentioned here, right from the beginning, I'll hurry up because there are more important points. And the global competitiveness, because I mentioned that if $107 billion is the world market, and the way we are growing, we have to see that we become competitive, especially because of the countries around us. Asian countries, Southeast countries, they are net importer and they'll continue to be importer. And we have got a very good product like ghee, paneer, which can become, very important part of diet all over the world. But we do have challenges if we have to become the global world leader. One is the cost of production, we have to continue to do that. Other challenges which are quality, market access, and other thing. This is very important slide because I have to end in another 5-7 minutes. Dekhiye, what are the challenges for Indian dairy industry? We have been growing till now, you can see 4x in last 50 years. Reason is simple, because one side farmers were happy to invest more in dairy because he was getting very stable and competitive price. The other side, our consumption grew because we could provide dairy at a very affordable price to the lower middle class and lower class. And we have to see we continue at that level. For that reason, help of contribution from your industry is required. We need how to reduce cost of milk production per liter. We cannot afford increasing price like in the past to the consumer, because then consumption will get hit. So what is required from the same cow, getting more milk at per liter less cost? That is the biggest. Because I know, whenever you go to a farmer, he'll ask only 2 questions. You know what are those questions? किसी भी किसान के पास जाइए, मिल्क प्रोड्यूसर, सर दूध के दाम कब बढ़ाओगे, और सेकंड दान के रेट कब कम करोगे. दान means cattle feed. So they want price of milk to be increased and price of cattle feed to be reduced. What it means, he wants to increase his profit. So, but the way food is competing, income level there, what is required is how to reduce cost of milk production, and cost of milk production, 70% is the feeding cost. Other area is the animal productivity and breeding. If you were to increase the productivity, you have to see better breeding and better feeding practices. 25% of milk animals in India is a NICO. NICO means never ever conceived once. How to convert them into milking animals? No doubt to improve the feed, AI is there, but now sex-sorted semen, where 95% of male calf is born, or embryo transfer, IVF is being used now in dairy sector. These are things. Two other important is free trade agreement. Like I mentioned, because India is not only world's largest producer, but India is also world's biggest and fastest growing market. So anybody in the world, whether USA, Europe, because their consumption is not growing. So they want to capture this Indian market at any condition. And that is why you must have seen, observed, whenever any foreign delegation has come, Prime Minister, President, the first agenda is open dairy. And we are very thankful to the government of India that always they are sticking to the same policy, protecting. In India, dairy is allowed, imports are allowed free for any country. And there are duties 30 to 60%. And let me tell you, any of these countries which I am mentioning, Europe, USA, all these countries also have more or less same rate of duties or more than that. Recently, you must have read that how USA was putting pressure on India to open up dairy. Well, we have been always advocating that in India, dairy is not business. Like in USA, dairy is an industry. Only 25,000 farmers. It used to be 6 lakh farmers around 25 years back. But now all small farms have vanished. Dairy has become big, 10,000, 30,000, just 2 minutes. So what has happened? It has become industry, around $110 billion. In India, it is a livelihood. 80 million families or 18 million farmers vis-a-vis 25,000. So in industry versus livelihood is one reason. Second is the very important reason for a country with 1.45 billion is the food security. Let me tell you, if today India, 14 lakh crore rupees is the total GDP of dairy, which we are self-sufficient. And if we open up, and even 25% of dairy we start importing in the next 20, 30 years, like in edible oil. Edible oil, till mid-90s, India was more or less self-sufficient. And today, 65% of edible oil is being imported, and more than, I think, $10 billion. आप इमेजिन कीजिए, अगर इंडिया ने एडिबल ऑयल पॉलिसी फॉलो करके ओपन कर दिया, besides Indian food security is at stake, because the day India goes to the world market and 25% of India, you know how much requirement will be there? By that time, 75 million metric ton. Whole world trade is 100 million metric ton. If out of that 75 requirement from India comes, price in world market will double, triple. And it is not the question of food security of India. It is the question of food security of all the other countries in Asia, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Southeast country, Russia, China. What will happen there? Because this world price when double up, it will impact the food security of those countries also. So by this adopting, protecting, encouraging production of milk of self-sufficient India, India is not only protecting the food security of India, but all other milk deficit countries. And third reason is foreign exchange. Ab imagine kijiye, if we start importing dairy, it will be not less than $40-50 billion. So these are the major reasons. So lastly, आप यहाँ बैठे हैं, जो demand देखिए, मुझे कोई पूछ रहा था what is the demand of feed in dairy sector. तो I don't know much, you will be knowing, but I can do a basic calculation. 65 crore, 65 crore liter of milk is produced in India per day. It is recommended that 400 gram per liter is required. So अगर 5 liter भी दूध होता है तो 2 kg is required cattle feed. But let us take, even I take only half kg. 65 crore liter, if 20 rupees is the price of minimum feed, so half kg is 10 rupees. So 65 multiplied by 10, 650 crore rupees is the per day market, which is nothing but 2.3 lakh crore. And when I say another 25 years, it will multiply by 3 times. So you can imagine the size more than 5, 6 or 7 lakh crore, taking minimum. So that is the potentiality. Half kg per. So It is up to you how you do it. The other area is which I want to request, volatility in prices happen a lot in especially raw material. So as a dairy feed producer, I don't know how much backward integration you do, like in milk. How much you associate with the farmers to grow your ingredients or some contract farming and other thing. And also, basically, feed does not mean only the constant feed. Now, farmers is shifting more towards TMR and silage. How you can integrate with those things, that also you have to see. Fourth is that each animal requirement at each stage is different. How to educate farmer for using proper variety, proper nutritional value of the cattle feed. I mean, now new thing has come, like we have got a hand feed band, the neck band in the cows and buffalo, which can tell you what type of feed is required and how much feed is required. I believe there are some pH meters also have come which you can put inside the human and can know that which type of feed is required for the each animal. So these are the innovation, I think, which needs to be done by the feed industry for the farmers to understand the exact requirement of each animal and also to educate and keep them aware. So I think with these things, I like to end my talk. A lot of things are there. Only while ending, I can say that your industry is the backbone of a dairy industry or poultry feed. Your efficiencies will reflect the profitability of farmers. More efficient you are, more efficient farmer will be, and the industry will grow, and along with that, you can also grow. Thank you very much. Again, I thank you, CLFMA, for giving this opportunity. Thank you.